Have you ever witnessed a moment so impossible, so astonishing, that it seemed lifted straight from a Hollywood script? Picture a scorching summer day on Teterboro Airport's bustling tarmac. An opulent Bombardier Global 7500 jet, stranded with its engines sputtering, and a humble black mechanic named Lionel Gray stepping up to save the day. Tools in hand, sweat on his brow, Lionel coaxes life back into those turbines, and in the midst of roaring victory, the jet's billionaire owner, Desmond Sinclair, does the unthinkable. He drops to one knee and proposes on the spot. What follows is a saga of heartbreak and redemption that will shake every assumption you've ever had about love, wealth, and fate. Lionel Gray was born on the outskirts of Newark, New Jersey. Growing up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, shared with his older sister and aging grandmother, Lionel quickly learned that life rarely offered shortcuts or easy roads. His mother, Teresa, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, while his grandmother tried to make ends meet by selling homemade pies to the neighborhood. Every penny was stretched thin. Every meal was measured out with care. Despite this constant strain, their tiny home overflowed with love, laughter, and a sense of determination that Lionel would later carry into adulthood. From a young age, Lionel was enchanted by machines, cars, motorcycles, anything that rumbled or roared. He loved the smell of engine oil on his fingers and the feeling of gears snapping into place under his guidance. When the world seemed too heavy, he'd lose himself in the puzzle of repairing something broken, seeing possibility in every worn-out part. When Lionel turned 15, he spent weekends helping out at a local auto shop owned by a retired Air Force mechanic named Pete Chandler. Pete recognized the spark in Lionel's eyes whenever he lifted a hood or touched a ratchet. Son Pete would say, "You've got the hands of a surgeon." Don't ever forget that. Under Pete's mentorship, Lionel honed not just his mechanical skills, but also an ironclad work ethic. He learned that dedication and attention to detail could lead him toward a future far more expansive than the four walls of his childhood home. Late at night, Lionel often flipped through dog-eared manuals on aircraft engines he had borrowed from Pete. Though he had never been on a plane himself, the thought of working on massive turbines and cutting-edge components enthralled him. He dreamed of a day when he'd transition from the grease-stained floors of an auto shop to the pristine hangars of an airport. Despite his promising talent, Lionel couldn't escape the harsh realities of financial struggle. He worked part-time at Pete's shop, but still had to juggle odd jobs delivering groceries, scrubbing floors at a local diner, even repairing neighbors' lawnmowers for spare change. Each time his grandmother's medication bill arrived, it felt like a storm cloud settling over their apartment. Sometimes Lionel would pretend he wasn't hungry, so the women in his life would have enough to eat. Even as the grind wore him down, he never lost hope. He enrolled in a local technical high school, where an aviation maintenance program opened his eyes to greater possibilities. People often looked at him, this tall, thin black kid in oversized coveralls, and underestimated him. Yet Lionel quietly excelled, scoring at the top of his class. He knew that if he just kept his head down and worked, his break would come. It had to. By the time he turned 21, Lionel had earned an entry-level position as a ramp mechanic at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, an airfield famous for corporate jets and millionaires passing through. Teterboro was a world of immaculate hangars, gleaming metal, and travelers who didn't flinch at spending thousands of dollars just to fuel their private aircraft. For Lionel, stepping onto that tarmac felt like stepping into another universe, one where wealth and privilege flowed effortlessly. He was hired mostly for tire changes and routine system checks on small charter planes. But whenever a more complex issue arose, perhaps a turbine misfire or a glitch in the avionics, Lionel found himself volunteering. The seasoned supervisors soon noticed he had a knack for diagnosing problems quickly. He spoke quietly but with confidence, and he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Teterboro offered him a taste of the future he'd longed for, and he threw himself into the work wholeheartedly. Desmond Sinclair was the epitome of high society, a billionaire with boundless energy, flamboyant taste, and an ego to match. At just 33, he was an heir to a global conglomerate that dabbled in everything from luxury resorts to cutting-edge pharmaceuticals. The Sinclair name graced hospitals, universities, and even a wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Desmond was known to arrive at Teterboro in custom-tailored suits, accompanied by an entourage of assistants and bodyguards. He was also rumored to be impulsive. Tabloids loved his whirlwind romances and extravagant weekend getaways. His fiancée count rose and fell as quickly as the stock market. One month he'd be photographed on a yacht in Monaco with a famous singer. The next he was spotted on the red carpet with a Hollywood actress. For Desmond, love seemed transient, an accessory to wealth rather than an anchor to a real relationship. One scorching July afternoon, Desmond's custom Bombardier, Global 7500 jet, bedecked with plush leather seats, a private bedroom, and even a mini spa, experienced an unexpected engine failure. On a typical day, such an issue would be handled swiftly by a designated top-tier maintenance crew, but they were delayed due to scheduling conflicts. With the engine misbehaving and Desmond's urgent need to reach a high-stakes business meeting in Chicago, tensions soared. Lionel was on break when he heard frantic calls crackling through the radio. "We need an immediate check on Gate D4 VIP plane. Critical engine failure." Without hesitation, Lionel set down his sandwich, grabbed his trusty snap-on toolkit, and rushed toward the tarmac. The heat shimmered on the concrete, and security personnel swarmed around the plane. Through the plane's window, Lionel spotted the silhouette of a visibly agitated Desmond Sinclair, pacing and barking orders into his phone. As Lionel approached the jet, a flustered ground coordinator waved him over. "Do whatever you can," she pleaded. "Mr. Sinclair's in a hurry. Nobody else is available." "You're it." Desmond, stepping off the plane's interior stairs, glanced skeptically at Lionel. Maybe it was the grease stains on his coveralls or the sweat beading on his forehead, but Desmond's eyes betrayed doubt. Lionel nodded politely, calmly ignoring the billionaire's half-hidden sneer. Without missing a beat, he slid under the plane's belly and started examining the engine casing. Wires, hoses, and bolts. Lionel methodically checked them one by one, diagnosing the root of the problem. He called for parts, barked directions to another mechanic to fetch specialized equipment, and soon had the malfunctioning engine panel disassembled. The entire operation took less than 20 minutes, but to Lionel it felt like an eternity of silent concentration under the relentless sun. The engine roared to life with a steady whine, prompting cheers and applause from airport staff and onlookers who had gathered to watch. Lionel emerged from beneath the plane, drenched in sweat, but grinning ear to ear. The sense of accomplishment surged through his veins. In the cockpit, the pilot tested the thrust levers. Everything was responding perfectly. Desmond strode over eyes, scanning the newly functional aircraft. For a brief second, it seemed as if humility touched the billionaire's face. "I can't believe you fixed it that fast," he admitted, glancing at Lionel's name patch. "Lionel Gray. Huh. You've just saved me millions in potential losses, not to mention my reputation." He hesitated, as though words failed him. Suddenly, In front of the entire crew, he dropped onto one knee. "Marry me," he said breathlessly, producing a small velvet box from his jacket. "Right here, right now." A collective gasp echoed across the tarmac. Airport workers halted in their tracks. Security guards exchanged stunned glances. Lionel stood frozen, unsure if it was a prank, a nervous breakdown, or some bizarre publicity stunt. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine a scenario in which a billionaire someone he'd just met would drop to one knee and propose. Within minutes, bystanders' phones were out recording the surreal scene. One of the ground staff live-streamed the moment on Instagram, capturing the outlandish proposal and Lionel's dumbstruck expression. The footage went viral within hours, shared by gossip channels and trending under hashtags like #Tarmac proposal and #from mechanic to millionaire. Comment sections lit up with everything from romantic swooning to skeptical cynicism. Why would a billionaire propose to a man he'd just met? Was this a joke, a publicity stunt? Or perhaps something deeper, more spontaneous, and inexplicably real? Lionel felt his heart thunder in his chest. All his life he had battled to keep a roof over his family's head. Now here was a man who could buy entire cities offering him marriage as if it were the most natural next step. Lionel's immediate reaction was a mixture of panic confusion and a flicker of hope he didn't dare let himself feel. He looked around, seeing the eyes of co-workers, airport supervisors, and even random travelers all fixed on him. He stammered, "I don't know what to say." Desmond's posture, still on one knee, began to tremble slightly. The billionaire's voice grew softer. "Just say yes. You saved me, Lionel. Let me save you. Give me a chance." Each word dripped with urgency and an odd sincerity. Lionel's instincts screamed caution, yet part of him wondered if this insane proposition might be a gateway to the life he'd always yearned for. Later, Desmond would explain that he'd felt an electric spark when he watched Lionel bringing his prized aircraft back to life. This wasn't just gratitude for the mechanical fix, it was something more emotional, almost mystical. In interviews, Desmond admitted he had always believed in grand gestures. He had grown up with an abundance of wealth, but felt starved for genuine connection. Money-made romance complicated people were either awed by him or intimidated. Standing on that sweltering tarmac, watching Lionel operate with calm assurance, Desmond claimed he saw a purity of spirit he'd never witnessed before. It seemed reckless and outrageous, but in his mind, dropping to one knee was the ultimate expression of how he wanted to live, led by the heart, not by the head. It didn't matter that he barely knew this mechanic. His entire being buzzed with the certainty that fate had arranged this encounter. The Sinclairs were no ordinary family. Founded by Desmond's grandfather, the Sinclair Group commanded a sprawling empire of luxury hotels, cutting-edge medical research labs, and philanthropic institutions. Their name adorned the library at Harvard University and a wing at New York Presbyterian Hospital. Desmond's mother, Isadora Sinclair, was a formidable figure. A woman known for her philanthropic endeavors, as well as her unyielding stance on preserving the family legacy. When news of Desmond's impulsive tarmac proposal reached her, Isadora almost dropped her porcelain teacup. She had navigated the most turbulent waters of high society politics, but never had she encountered a scandal like this. A wedding to a mechanic from Newark threatened not only the Sinclair image, but also the carefully orchestrated alliances that Isadora had spent years cultivating. To her, the proposal was an outrageous act of rebellion. She wasted no time planning her next move, a discreet but firm intervention. In the days following the viral proposal, Lionel's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old classmates, distant relatives, and strangers alike all called, texted, or messaged him on social media. Even the local news ran a segment on his improbable engagement to one of the richest men in the country. Meanwhile, Teterboro's management insisted he take a leave of absence for his own safety. Paparazzi had begun stalking the airport, desperately seeking photos of the soon-to-be spouse of Desmond Sinclair. At home, Lionel found it impossible to hide from the media circus. Camera crews parked outside his building, reporters hounding his neighbors for quotes. This sudden spotlight ignited both anxiety and cautious excitement. His mother, Teresa, was overwhelmed but supportive. She trusted Lionel's instincts, but also feared how quickly his life was changing. For Lionel, torn between the euphoria of a fairy tale and the terror of its consequences, nothing felt real anymore. Despite the swirling chaos, Desmond wanted a chance to court Lionel properly. He arranged a discreet dinner in a private suite at Manhattan's iconic Plaza Hotel, complete with candlelight, soft jazz music, and a personal chef who prepared a lavish 5-course meal. Lionel arrived in a simple black suit borrowed from a friend, feeling out of place among the gilded chandeliers and ornate furnishings. At the table, Desmond tried to break the ice, joking that they'd had the most unconventional proposal in modern history. Lionel laughed nervously, unable to shake the feeling that he was an actor in someone else's story. Yet, as the night unfolded, they discovered surprising common ground. They both cared deeply about community service. Lionel through mechanical repairs for people who couldn't afford them, Desmond through donations to grassroots initiatives. By dessert, Lionel felt a faint glimmer of possibility. Maybe this wasn't just an insane stunt. Maybe it was something real. But the world wasn't so easily convinced. Tabloids labeled their budding relationship a headline hoax. Skeptics claimed Lionel was a gold digger, insinuating he had orchestrated the plane's malfunction to ensnare Desmond. Others insisted Desmond was addicted to attention, citing his track record of high-profile romances. The rumor mill churned with every new piece of evidence, including leaked photos, old tweets, and questionable insider scoops from unnamed family friends. Lionel tried to ignore the vitriol, yet it stung when even close acquaintances hinted at his lucky break. Some pinned him as cunning. Some just pitied him, sure he'd be discarded once Desmond's novelty wore off. Desmond, too, faced backlash from corporate boards and investors who frowned upon what they considered reckless personal choices. Public relations firms were busy spinning narratives, and the couple found themselves at the center of a whirlwind they could barely control. Within a week, Lionel received a formal request to meet Isadora Sinclair at the family's penthouse on Fifth Avenue. The invitation was more command than courtesy, delivered by an impeccably dressed assistant. Desmond apologized profusely, but insisted that meeting his mother was unavoidable. "She's protective of the family," he offered in half-hearted explanation. Stepping into the grand foyer of the Sinclair penthouse, Lionel felt his nerves tighten. The marble floors glistened under towering windows, offering a panoramic view of Central Park. Gilded mirrors, priceless art, and a team of stoic staff gave the space a museum-like quality. Isadora appeared at the top of a sweeping staircase, wearing a tailored gown and a neutral expression. She glided down like royalty descending from a throne. Extending a slender hand, she greeted Lionel with cool politeness. "Thank you for coming," she said, as though addressing a petitioner rather than her son's fiancé. Isadora led Lionel to a private sitting room, where only the distant hum of city traffic could be heard. She offered tea, poured by a silent housekeeper, and then went straight to business. I understand my son has proposed marriage to you, she began evenly. Lionel felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He nodded, unsure of what else to say. She continued, measuring each word. Desmond's decisions often reflect impulsivity rather than careful thought. The Sinclair name carries weight philanthropically, socially and financially, that must be preserved. Now, I have no intention of stopping love if it's genuine, but I do insist on a thorough arrangement to ensure both parties' well-being. She produced a stack of papers, elaborating on prenuptial clauses, confidentiality agreements, and lifestyle provisions. If you truly care for Desmond, you will sign these upholding his best interests as well as our family's. Lionel stared at the documents, feeling the oppressive weight of the Sinclair family's expectations. The pages included clauses restricting his public appearances, detailing how any children would be raised, and even granting Isadora oversight on large financial transactions. To Lionel, it seemed like a contract for a corporate merger, not a marriage built on trust. He cleared his throat. I need time to review this, he said carefully, afraid that outright rejection might cause a scene. Isadora nodded, glancing at him with an inscrutable gaze. Very well. I expect your decision soon. As Lionel left, he could feel his knees trembling. He had never wanted a lavish lifestyle or paparazzi attention. All he had yearned for was to secure a brighter future for himself and his family. Now he was entering a realm so foreign that it felt like wandering through a gilded maze with no clear exit. Later that evening, Lionel confronted Desmond in a quiet corner of the penthouse library. He laid the documents on a mahogany table and asked, "Why didn't you tell me about this, about your mother's conditions?" Desmond ran a hand through his meticulously styled hair. Eyes clouded with guilt. "I'm sorry. I knew she'd try something like this. She's done it before with previous relationships. But this is different." He explained that his mother had orchestrated the end of more than one relationship, sometimes paying off potential partners to leave. Desmond had never cared enough about those relationships to fight back. But Lionel was different. Desmond found himself genuinely smitten and determined to break free from his mother's manipulations. "I'll talk to her," he promised, reaching for Lionel's hand. "I can't lose you." Lionel squeezed back, torn between the sincerity he felt from Desmond and the empire that loomed over them. Desmond had a suggestion. "Come with me to Chicago. Let's get away from all this noise. You can meet my business associates. See what my life is like outside of my mother's shadow." Chicago represented a massive real estate deal that Desmond was finalizing, a shining new skyscraper carrying the Sinclair name. It also symbolized Desmond's personal sphere of influence, separate from Isadora's watchful eyes in New York. Lionel hesitated. The idea of traveling with Desmond, witnessing his daily world of high-stakes negotiations, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Yet maybe it would provide a clearer understanding of who Desmond truly was. After a moment of silence, Lionel nodded. "All right," he said, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "I'll go." Though an uneasy feeling coiled in Lionel's gut, fear of stepping further into a life that might consume him, he also felt a spark of hope. A week later, Lionel found himself once more on the tarmac at Teterboro, this time heading into the sleek interior of the very jet he had fixed. The staff greeted him respectfully, aware that he was now more than just a mechanic. As he settled into a plush leather seat, he couldn't help marveling at the irony. The first time he stepped onto this aircraft, it was to fix its failing engine. Now he was here as the fiancé of its billionaire owner. Desmond joined him, casually dressed in designer loungewear, a far cry from the corporate suits he wore around Manhattan. "You good?" he asked gently, noticing Lionel's slightly tense posture. "Still getting used to all this?" Lionel admitted, glancing out the window at the diminishing runway. Desmond reached across the aisle, taking Lionel's hand in his own. For the moment, the buzz of engines lulled them into a fragile sense of peace. Upon landing at Chicago's Midway Airport, a limousine whisked them to a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. The building was Desmond's latest project, a state-of-the-art condominium complex that merged architectural innovation with eco-friendly technologies. Crisp air greeted Lionel when he stepped out onto a glass-walled balcony, taking in the panorama of the city below. But the calm ended the moment they entered the boardroom. Executives in tailored suits sized Lionel up as Desmond introduced him as his fiancée. Some politely hid their surprise. Others displayed undisguised disdain. One board member, an older man with steel-grey hair, asked pointedly, "When did you say you two met?" The question hung in the air, dripping with insinuation. Desmond fired back a confident smile. "Only weeks ago," he said. "But I've never been surer of anything." Lionel felt the heat of their judgment, but forced himself to stand tall. He was here to support Desmond, come what may. That night, Lionel and Desmond dined in the penthouse suite of a 5-star Chicago hotel, courtesy of the Sinclair Group. Between courses, Desmond opened up about his childhood. His father had passed away when he was young, leaving the entire Sinclair empire to Isadora's stewardship. She had groomed Desmond for leadership from a tender age, instilling in him a relentless drive to succeed, but also an underlying fear of failure. Desmond confessed that despite his privileged life, he felt profoundly lonely. "Sometimes I don't know if people love me or the Sinclair brand. It's all so entangled." Lionel listened intently, recalling the simpler days he'd spent helping his mother pay bills and fix neighbors' cars. Both men realized they had grown up with burdens. Lionel's was financial hardship, and Desmond's was the weight of an empire. Different worlds, yet each carried invisible shackles that had shaped who they were. Amid their deepening connection, undercurrents of tension grew stronger. Anonymous threats began hitting Lionel's inbox, unscrambled phone calls, cryptic letters, warning him to back off before he gets hurt. Desmond suspected corporate rivals, or perhaps even disgruntled family members, who believed Lionel would disrupt Sinclair business alliances. Lionel, unaccustomed to such hostility, felt a chill run down his spine each time his phone buzzed with another unsettling message. Desmond hired extra security, but paranoia lingered. Every glance from strangers felt like a potential threat. The fear took its toll on Lionel, who often woke in the middle of the night, heart pounding from nightmares that he was trapped in a gilded cage with no way out. Even though he tried to keep a brave face, Desmond saw the toll it was taking. Their blossoming romance was caught in a storm of corporate politics, angry scrutiny, and unspoken dangers lurking in the shadows. Pushed to his limit, Lionel decided to confront the board member who had openly shown hostility during the Chicago meeting. His name was Walter Armitage, a long-time associate of the Sinclair family. According to Desmond, Walter had once been engaged in a questionable deal that Isadora had to clean up, leaving him forever indebted, but also resentful. Lionel found Walter in a corner of the construction site for the new high-rise checking progress and scolding workers, summoning courage. Lionel approached. "Whatever your issue is with me, say it to my face," Lionel stated bluntly. Walter sneered. "You're a distraction, a threat to Sinclair business stability. Desmond's impulsiveness already cost this company deals in the past. We can't afford another fiasco." Lionel clenched his fists but maintained composure. "Desmond is not just a brand. He's a person, and I'm here because I care about him, not his bank account." Despite the tension with Walter and other skeptics, Lionel found small joys in Chicago. He marveled at the city's architecture, devoured deep-dish pizza with Desmond in a hidden pizzeria away from the paparazzi, and even attended a jazz concert at a local club where they danced, albeit clumsily, to soulful tunes that transcended their problems. These shared moments fortified their bond. On one such evening, they strolled along the Chicago River, the skyline sparkling behind them. Desmond tentatively asked, "If we could escape all this madness, my mother, the tabloids, the corporate sharks, would you still want to be with me?" The question caught Lionel off guard, but his answer flowed easily. "Yes," he said softly. "I don't care about the money or the name. I care about you." Desmond's eyes glistened. In that instant, it felt like the entire city folded away, leaving just the two of them clinging to a fragile but genuine love. Their homecoming to New York felt like stepping from a warm oasis into a cold war. More cryptic threats awaited Lionel, intensifying in both frequency and malice. A suspicious car followed him from the airport, speeding away, only when he pulled into a well-lit parking lot. Desmond grew frantic, demanding more protective measures. Isadora, for her part, maintained an icy aloofness. She neither welcomed Lionel nor openly opposed him, an unnerving neutrality. The tabloids had a field day, covering the couple's every movement. Detractors insinuated that Lionel's Cinderella story was about to come crashing down. Some tabloids hinted that an ex-lover of Desmond's was seeking legal action, claiming breach of promise. Others speculated that the entire engagement was a PR strategy to overshadow a looming corporate scandal. The swirling rumors left Lionel feeling like he stood on quicksand, unsure of which step would sink him deeper into ruin. Amid this turmoil, a ghost from Lionel's past resurfaced. His estranged father, James Gray, appeared at Lionel's doorstep one evening, sporting a crumpled jacket and apologetic eyes. James had abandoned the family years ago, descending into alcoholism and vanishing without a trace. Now he mumbled remorse about missed birthdays and unpaid child support, claiming he'd turned his life around and wanted a second chance. Lionel felt torn. A part of him longed for a father's acceptance, but another part seethed with rage over James's years of absence and neglect. Suspicion gnawed at him. Was James truly repentant, or was he drawn by Lionel's newfound celebrity and potential fortune? Meanwhile, Desmond, upon learning of James's reappearance, offered guarded support. "I won't tell you to forgive him," Desmond said, "but I'll stand by whatever decision you make." That night, Lionel struggled to sleep, haunted by the uncertain motives of a man he barely knew anymore. Lionel's worst suspicions were confirmed when he discovered that James had approached Isadora with a proposition he would publicly denounce Lionel's engagement, fabricating lies or spinning half-truths if Isadora would pay him a lump sum. The plan was to sow doubt about Lionel's credibility, painting him as a manipulative opportunist. Unbeknownst to James, Isadora recorded their conversation as evidence of potential blackmail. She then confronted Lionel with the recording, claiming she wished to protect her son from further scandal. Though Lionel appreciated the warning, the sting of betrayal cut deep. He felt humiliated that his own father would stoop so low for a quick payout. Isadora played the role of a savior in that moment, a stark contrast to her earlier coldness. Lionel wanted to believe she was being genuine, But experience taught him that nothing in the Sinclair world was ever that simple. A new question loomed. What would Isadora want in return for her loyalty? Just as Lionel grappled with his father's betrayal, a bigger crisis erupted at Sinclair Group. An investigative journalist from the Washington Post revealed irregularities in the financial dealings of one of Sinclair's major subsidiaries. Allegations included fraudulent accounting, hidden offshore assets, and unethical labor practices. The news rattled shareholders, plummeting the company's stock. Suddenly, Desmond was consumed by damage control, spending endless hours in emergency board meetings. As the scandal spread, the media swiftly pivoted from the Tarmac proposal to Sinclair's corporate meltdown. Desmond's name was dragged through the mud, with critics accusing him of negligence or complicity. Lionel watched from the sidelines, heart heavy with concern. Isadora, always the strategist, orchestrated a swift internal investigation, hoping to root out corruption. Yet suspicion clung to Desmond like a shadow. Hard karma, indeed, seemed to be hitting the entire Sinclair empire, forcing them to confront the costs of their ambition and secrecy. In the midst of the crisis, Desmond grew distant, caught in a whirlwind of legal briefs, PR statements, and hostile board members who questioned his competence. Lionel, feeling powerless, discovered a surprising way to help. He meticulously reviewed technical contracts for the company's aviation and infrastructure projects. With his mechanical background, he identified inconsistencies and inflated budgets that might indicate deeper corruption. He brought his findings to Desmond and Isadora. Desmond's eyes, bloodshot from stress, stared at the evidence. "How did you catch this?" he asked, marveling at Lionel's sharp eye for detail. Lionel shrugged. "I just know when the numbers aren't adding up the same way I know when an engine isn't firing right." Isadora, for once, smiled at Lionel. "It seems we underestimated you," she said quietly. In that moment, Lionel felt a glimmer of acceptance from the formidable matriarch. Despite the temporary alliance, tensions within the Sinclair empire remained high. Walter Armitage re-emerged, seizing the scandal as an opportunity to challenge Desmond's authority. At a pivotal board meeting, he demanded Desmond's resignation, citing poor judgment and external distractions, a not-so-subtle nod to Lionel. Tempers flared, culminating in Desmond slamming his fist on the table. "I will not step down," he roared. "I've done nothing wrong. We will fix this mess." That evening, Isadora quietly pulled Lionel aside. She insinuated that if Lionel truly loved Desmond, he would persuade him to temporarily relinquish control, at least until the company stabilized. Think of it as an act of self-sacrifice for Desmond's future. She coaxed eyes steeled with ambition. The proposition tore at Lionel's conscience. Supporting Desmond meant respecting his decision to fight back, but Isadora's plan might indeed save him from further corporate bloodshed. It felt like a lose-lose situation. Overwhelmed, Lionel retreated to his old neighborhood in Newark for a night, seeking solace in the cramped apartment where his mother still lived. Teresa greeted him with open arms, providing the warmth and familiarity he'd been missing. "I'm proud of you," she said, stroking his hair like she did when he was little. "But I worry that you're carrying too much." They talked deep into the night. Lionel poured out his anxieties. The threats, the corporate vultures, his father's betrayal, and the uncertain future with Desmond. Teresa listened patiently. "Love doesn't come easy," she whispered, "especially when the world is trying to tear you apart. But if you believe in what you have to fight for it. Just don't lose sight of who you are." Lionel felt tears slip down his cheeks. He nodded, realizing that no matter the pressure he had to remain true to himself. Meanwhile, Desmond found himself alone in the penthouse library, swirling a glass of whiskey he barely sipped. His reflection in the window felt like a stranger, an image of a man burdened by crisis. The scandal had grown more complicated, with new whistleblowers emerging. He couldn't sleep, haunted by a relentless cycle of phone calls and urgent emails. A single question gnawed at him. Had his mother orchestrated shady deals behind his back? Leaving him to shoulder the blame now that it was uncovered, Isadora had always been protective, but her fierce drive to expand the Sinclair empire sometimes blurred ethical lines. Tears welled in Desmond's eyes as he realized how little control he truly had. He thought of Lionel, his calm, purposeful stare under the wing of a broken jet. Had he dragged Lionel into this corporate quagmire only to watch him get hurt? Faced with mounting legal pressure and cornered by investigative journalists circling the Sinclair empire like vultures, Isadora finally did something she rarely allowed herself. She admitted fault. In a private wood-paneled conference room nestled deep within Sinclair Tower, she sat across from Desmond and Lionel, her diamond brooch gleaming under the recessed lighting, but her eyes uncharacteristically hollow. "I trusted the wrong people," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Old friends, former partners. I thought loyalty would protect us, but all it did was blind me." Her hands trembled as she slid a folder across the table inside a series of internal memos, emails, and financial statements implicating 2 senior executives in manipulating quarterly reports and hiding offshore assets. "I signed off on expansions I barely understood." She continued, tears gathering in her eyes. "I was so focused on building a legacy. I didn't see it rotting beneath my feet." Desmond leaned back, shell-shocked. "You told me everything was above board." "I believed it was," she replied, "until it wasn't." Lionel sat still, listening, watching the once impervious matriarch unravel before them. He didn't feel triumph, only gravity. This wasn't just a confession, it was the crumbling of a dynasty's illusion of invincibility. After a tense silence, Desmond reached for the folder. His jaw clenched, but he didn't lash out. "We'll take this to legal," he said calmly. "We'll draft a full disclosure for the board. If we control the narrative, we might survive this." Isadora nodded slowly, her expression a mixture of shame and relief. "I'll testify. I'll take the blame publicly if I must." Lionel finally spoke, his voice steady. "It's not about blame anymore. It's about cleaning up the mess so you don't have to keep pretending perfection." In that moment, an unspoken shift occurred. The 3 of them, Lionel the outsider, Desmond the embattled heir, and Isadora the penitent queen, formed a fragile coalition. With Isadora's cooperation, they compiled a comprehensive dossier outlining exactly who had authorized what, when, and why. They detailed the shady shell companies, traced missing funds, and established a timeline that clearly exonerated Desmond from direct involvement. The act of working together didn't magically heal old wounds, but it opened a door. Later that evening, as they stood in the penthouse overlooking the skyline, Isadora turned to Lionel. Her tone was softer now, tinged with something that almost resembled respect. "You didn't run when it got hard. That tells me more about you than any background check ever could." Lionel offered a faint smile. "I've never had the luxury to run." Desmond slipped an arm around his shoulders. "And I'm done hiding. From the board, from the press, from my mother. We face this together now." And so amid the storm, a truce was forged, not just between a mother and son, but between power and humility, control and trust. For the first time, they weren't maintaining the empire. They were rebuilding it together. With the corporate crisis no longer spiraling but still simmering beneath the surface, Desmond and Lionel made a bold decision. They would no longer postpone their happiness. "If we wait for the perfect moment," Desmond said one evening, his head resting on Lionel's shoulder, "as the city skyline flickered through the windows, we'll be waiting forever." Lionel hesitated at first. The press still camped outside their building some days. Online chatter swung wildly between admiration and skepticism. But in the quiet moments, their long walks, their late-night talks, Desmond's whispered apologies, and Lionel's steady reassurances, love endured. Not as a fairy tale, but as something forged in fire. "We deserve this." Lionel finally agreed. "Let's take something back from all the people who tried to take everything away from us." Together they began to plan, not a spectacle, but something real. They chose the Cloisters in Upper Manhattan for its haunting beauty, its quiet dignity. Perched above the Hudson River, its medieval architecture felt removed from the noise and greed of the modern world. "It's timeless," Desmond said when they first visited. "Like us, or like what we're trying to build." The guest list was kept tight. Desmond insisted on inviting only those who had stood by them, not the boardroom sycophants or society socialites, but friends, family, and a few steadfast allies. Lionel's mother, Teresa, took charge of coordinating attire and flower arrangements with a quiet authority that quickly charmed the wedding planners. "She's like a warm hurricane," one of them whispered to Desmond after their first meeting, and he could only laugh in agreement. Isadora, to everyone's surprise, volunteered to fund the ceremony, but with no strings attached. "This is your moment," she said, handing over a blank check to Desmond with solemn dignity. "Make it yours." She even offered to host a small reception at the Sinclair family estate, but Lionel declined politely. "I want this to be ours, not branded by legacy," he said gently. And to her credit, Isadora nodded. In a private moment, she pulled Lionel aside and said, "You've changed my son, you know. And maybe you've changed me too." Meanwhile, public opinion began to shift. After the release of the corruption dossier and Lionel's role in uncovering it, tabloids turned sympathetic. Headlines read, "From jet mechanic to savior of Sinclair, and the groom who fixed more than just engines." The internet dubbed their union not just a romance, but a revolution against class barriers and corporate artifice. The night before the wedding, Desmond and Lionel sat in the empty courtyard where their vows would be exchanged the next morning. A soft breeze rustled the ivy-covered stones. "Are you ready?" Desmond asked. "I've been ready since the moment I got under that jet," Lionel replied with a smile. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a threat. It looked like a promise. The morning of the wedding dawned with a gentle hush over Manhattan, as if the city itself understood the sacredness of what was to come. Above the Hudson River, the Cloisters stood like a sentinel of old-world grace, its ancient stones warmed by the golden brush of autumn light. Ivy trailed along the walls, and orange and crimson leaves fluttered to the cobbled ground like nature's confetti. Inside a small stone chamber, tucked away from the main courtyard, Lionel stood before a tall mirror, adjusting the collar of his black tuxedo. It was the same suit he had once borrowed for his first formal dinner with Desmond. Only now it had been properly tailored, every stitch a symbol of how far he'd come. Teresa, his mother, fastened a silver military brooch onto his lapel, an heirloom from Lionel's grandfather who had served in Korea. "I want him with you today," she whispered, smoothing his shoulders. "Your grandpa believed in honor. You're living it." Lionel nodded, eyes glassy with emotion. "Thanks, Mom, for everything." Across the courtyard, in a vaulted dressing room, lined with medieval tapestries, Desmond fumbled with his cufflinks. His hands trembled, not from nerves but from emotion. "Why am I crying over gold buttons?" he muttered, chuckling through misty eyes. His cousin Geneva, one of the few family members who had supported the union from the start, stepped forward and fixed them for him. "Because you're finally marrying someone who loves you, not the name. That's worth crying over." As guests arrived, they were ushered into the sun-dappled courtyard where the ceremony would take place. Rows of wooden chairs faced a stone altar draped with simple white linen and framed by cascading greenery. A string quartet played softly, an arrangement of Nina Simone and Debussy, blending elegance with soul. Teresa sat in the front row beside Lionel's sister, both beaming with quiet pride. Isadora arrived moments later in a tasteful navy gown, her signature pearls replaced with a modest brooch. She nodded politely at Teresa, and the two women exchanged a brief glance of truce. When the officiant signaled, the crowd rose. Lionel stepped into the aisle, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Every step forward felt like shedding a layer of fear, shame, and doubt. His eyes locked with Desmond's, who stood waiting in a matching tux backlit by the morning sun. The wind tugged gently at Desmond's hair, but he looked statuesque, unshakable, his smile faint and teary. As Lionel reached the altar, Desmond whispered, "You came." "I never left," Lionel whispered back. The vows were handwritten. Lionel spoke first, his voice clear. "I once believed I was only meant to fix things. Machines, engines, broken parts. But you showed me I could build something too. A life, a love, a future." Desmond followed his voice, catching at times. "You were never a chapter in my story, Lionel. You were the plot twist that gave it meaning." As they exchanged rings crafted from recycled titanium, salvaged from the same bombardier jet Lionel had repaired, it felt like destiny circling back. When the officiant declared them married, cheers erupted. Desmond swept Lionel into a kiss that felt like coming home, and the sound of applause echoed through the ancient stones, mingling with bird songs and distant church bells. Tears flowed freely among friends, staff from the jet hangar, and even a few former skeptics. The applause wasn't just for a wedding. It was for a battle survived, a love earned. As they recessed down the aisle, hand in hand, petals fell from above, and Desmond whispered in Lionel's ear, "Let's go build something even better." Lionel smiled. "We already have." The wedding had come and gone like a brilliant flash of lightning, luminous, unforgettable, and capable of leaving the world a little changed in its wake. Now, in the cool, reflective days that followed, Lionel and Desmond found themselves slowly carving out a new rhythm. They returned to a quieter Manhattan. The tabloid frenzy had finally waned, replaced by a blend of admiration and cautious curiosity from the public. Online forums that once speculated about gold digging and PR stunts now shared clips of their vows, calling the ceremony one of the most heartfelt weddings of the year. For Desmond, life no longer revolved around the breakneck world of acquisitions and public image. With the internal dossier exposing the corruption and implicating those responsible, Sinclair Group was in the process of rebuilding its credibility. Several top executives were ousted, and Isadora stepped down from day-to-day oversight, citing a desire to reflect and realign her values. But the empire was far from crumbling. Desmond, now more grounded than ever, took a new leadership approach, leaning into ethics, transparency, and innovation. He made it clear in press conferences that his priority wasn't salvaging a brand image, but rebuilding the soul of the company. Shareholders responded with a cautious but hopeful optimism. Lionel, meanwhile, was finding his own voice inside that empire. No longer just the mechanic who got lucky, he was offered a formal consulting role overseeing Sinclair Aviation's technical operations. His blend of hands-on knowledge and practical insight made him a valuable asset, especially during the audits. He spent his mornings reviewing engine maintenance logs and flight route safety assessments. His afternoons were filled with team briefings, where his grounded, humble leadership style earned him genuine respect from engineers and pilots alike. "You talk like you know what it's like under the wing," one technician said. Lionel smiled. "Because I do." Back home, their apartment became a true sanctuary. Gone were the tense, sleepless nights, filled with scandal headlines and whispered doubts. In their place came slow dinners, shared playlists, and nights on the balcony, watching the city breathe. Desmond took to cooking, albeit with questionable results, while Lionel found peace in restoring a vintage motorcycle in the corner of their living room. "Something about fixing what's old," he said, "reminds me that everything has a second chance." As for Lionel's father, James Gray, he disappeared once Isadora's recording of the blackmail attempt was released to legal authorities. No further contact was made, and Lionel made peace with that. "Sometimes closure doesn't come with a door slamming," he told Teresa. "Sometimes it's just walking away before it ever opens again." Desmond and Isadora, once trapped in a cycle of expectations and resistance, began a slow healing process too. She invited Teresa and Lionel for tea one quiet Sunday afternoon, serving cucumber sandwiches and Darjeeling like royalty. The visit was awkward at first, but ended with genuine laughter and a moment where Teresa and Isadora agreed grudgingly that both their sons had done something right. Public perception continued to evolve. News articles painted Lionel not just as Desmond's partner, but as a stabilizing force within Sinclair. He became a guest speaker at vocational schools, urging students not to underestimate their talents just because they come from humble beginnings. "You don't have to wear a suit to be powerful," he said during one talk. "Sometimes grease-stained hands build the strongest foundations." And so what had started with a sputtering jet on a tarmac became something much bigger. A story of unlikely love, resilience, and transformation. Lionel and Desmond were no longer trying to fit into someone else's mold. They were shaping a new legacy. One conversation, one choice, one repaired engine at a time. The fairy tale hadn't ended. It had only just begun. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey from that sweltering day on Teterboro Airport's tarmac to the grand halls of the Sinclair Empire where love clashed with power, betrayal gave way to redemption, and two souls from different worlds found each other in the most unexpected way. If this story has kept you on the edge of your seat and reminded you that life's greatest rewards often emerge from the most daunting challenges, then we invite you to be a part of our community. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Keep that spark of hope alive, because you never know when your own impossible moment might arrive, just like a broken jet engine roaring back to life, or a proposal that defies all expectations. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.